Hey guys, so today we're doing our first major change to the 65-inch 4K motion rig since we built it almost a year ago now. So SimLab have very kindly sent over a D-Box 4250i Generation 3 motion system, and we're going to be replacing the motion system that we have currently on the rig, so the Traction Plus system as well as the seat mover, and seeing how the experience compares. So we're going to start off with today's video basically just building the system, putting it all together, pulling what we currently have out of the system, and hopefully getting up and driving for our first experience. We'll obviously do a detailed review a little bit further down the track where we'll go through all the details of the rig and exactly what you can expect from it. We also have a Sigma Integrale motion system too, which Tom actually has installed on his rig currently. So we're going to be doing some comparisons between the two. So make sure you're subbed so you don't miss out on those further down the track. But big thank you to SimLabs for sending this over, as well as D-Box for their cooperation there too. Very much appreciated. So we'll start off today's video by having a look at what we actually have here in place at the moment, the way it's kind of been working for us and how we've worked around some of the limitations that we have in the current system. Obviously we do have some dedicated videos where we've talked about the seat mover and Traction Plus in a lot more detail, so I'll put some links down in the description below for that. But yeah, really the focus today is just getting up and running with the D-Box system and sort of just taking you through the first experience with it. And hopefully by the end of the day, we'll have a good first impression on what it's like to drive with a full motion D-Box 4250i V3 motion system. So let's get started. Just to quickly update you on the rig as it stands now, you got to remember this rig has been primarily built for content creation. So the way we're going to have the seat mover working, the way the traction system works is all kind of done in a way that is intended for using a helmet cam or over the shoulder cam, like what you see in some of our videos. And that kind of simulates the kind of movement that you expect from your body kind of bouncing around inside the seat inside a race car. So we're kind of simulating the effects that it has on your body rather than the movement of the car, so to speak. And that's a really important distinction to make. Now, obviously with the seat mover, the seat is moving independently of everything else. So the seat literally just pitches and rolls. The steering wheel stays fixed, pedals stay fixed, everything else stays fixed, including the screens too. Then we obviously have the Traction Plus system underneath that too. So we have pitch and roll on the seat, and then we have yaw or sway on the Traction Plus system. So this does allow independent movement of the front and rear, so you can kind of have that sway or twist as well as just independent yaw. So essentially this is a 3 degrees of freedom or 3 DOF system, pitch and roll of the seat, and then yaw or sway for the entire rig. Now, if we compare that to the D-Box system, that is still a 3 degrees of freedom or 3 DOF system, but we have pitch and roll of the entire cockpit this time rather than just the seat. And then on top of that, instead of having the yaw or sway, we're gonna have heave, which is the ability for the entire thing to lift up and down. Now that is really good for simulating things like bumps in the road surface. Now, it's not something that I've experienced personally yet. Tom has a little bit of experience with the Sigma Integrale, so it's gonna be really interesting for me to see exactly how that experience compares. What we're going to do is start off by removing the seat mover entirely, removing the Traction Plus system entirely too, and probably leaving the butt kicker switched off as well, just so we get that raw experience with the D-Box, and then we'll add in other elements as we see fit a little bit further down the road. All right, so we got 4 boxes. One, I believe, is mounting hardware. Then we've got the motion controller KCU1P, and then we've got 2 boxes labeled 2250i, so I'm guessing there's 2 actuators per box, which would add the 2 together to make the 4250i system. So let's start off, we'll have a look at what's in the mounting hardware. Now remember, this is purchased from SimLabs or sent by SimLabs, so I'm guessing they include their own special mounting hardware. Let's have a look. Yeah, okay. So, and again, I'm just flying blind here and just sort of sharing the experience with you guys. We'll obviously do our research and get everything figured out properly before we do a proper review. So little laser etched and anodized mounting brackets. So I assume 2 go on the actuators and 2 bolt onto the side of the profile on each side. So that's pretty cool. Should be more of those, I think. Yeah, there's the other side. I was going to say 4 doesn't seem right because you got 2 per actuator, but no, there's another 4, so that's good. I was a little bit worried there. Then we've got these cups, which are where the actuator will sit. So they're like little casters, so that sits on the ground, and I guess it feels like it might be Delrin or something, or some sort of a Teflon or nylon. Yeah, I think it's Delrin. So yeah, the actuators will sit on top of those. Mounting hardware, the typical SimLab style, all nicely labelled. A big metal sheet, which I assume must be a plate which will bolt up underneath the P1X. Yep, so this is a plate that'll bolt up underneath the P1X, and I assume the control box will sit on top of that. So that's all good. All right, motion controller. So we've got a warranty sheet, a D-box sticker. All right, power cables for various different regions. Doesn't look like we have one for Australia though, so that's okay. We've got others that we can use. Little power brick, which obviously isn't the power to the actuators, because there's no way that's enough juice, I would imagine, but again, we'll figure that out. USB cable and little control box. So it's got a network port on it, a USB connection, and then a DC power jack as well. So 48 volts, 0.63 of an amp, so obviously not enough to drive the entire system. So that's just it's just like a little control box, and then obviously there's going to be a brains for the other bits as well. What else have we got in here? Nothing else? No. Okay. And then we've got the main two boxes. So try to do this gracefully. Ta-da! There we go. We've got a quick start guide, not an instruction manual, quick start guide. All right, so we've got an actuator control module, which is obviously this part. Then the actuators themselves, actually a lot smaller than I imagined. I kind of envisaged them being about 4 times this size, so that's really interesting. There you go. That's what they look like. Yeah, in my head, they kind of, yeah, I don't know why, but yeah, I kind of just imagine them being a lot bigger than that. We've got more power cables, so we're going to probably have to go out and buy some IEC connectors for Australia, I would imagine, because we're going to need 3 of them, and I don't know if I have 3 spare. Looks pretty straightforward. We've got a manual that we can download from their website directly. Unpack from the box. Don't pull on the cables. Okay, I won't. Visually inspect, inventory, assure you've got all the right components. Motion core, blah, 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 blah. So I assume that the second box is probably going to be pretty much identical. Yep. So I think what we'll do from here is get everything out of the box, maybe get everything plugged in and tested just on the floor, make sure everything's functioning correctly before we pull apart the rig, because obviously we need the rig to be able to record our racing videos, and if there's any problems with this, we don't want to find out after we've already pulled everything apart. So we'll get it all plugged in, get it all functioning and tested, and then we can get to installing. So we've got all the bits and pieces laid out on the floor here to do a little bit of testing. One thing I do need to clarify is the 2 boxes weren't identical to each other. One is a master and one is a slave. So they did have different part numbers, even though at face value they looked exactly the same. So same actuators, obviously, but yeah, master and slave. So we've got power supply, control module, master box, slave box. So if we have a look at the instructions here, you can see there's a bit of a daisy chain we need to set up to get everything connected. And we're using these RJ45 Ethernet shielded cables to get that job done. So we're going to go from our control box, master out, and then that's going to connect to in on our master. And then we're going to daisy chain from out to end, like so. It's saying the last master must be terminated. This is the last master because we only have 1 master. And then we're going to go same deal again. So we're going to undo 1 loop. We're going to go master out. Go this way. Or next. And that's going to connect to input on our slave. And then we're going to go slave out to slave end to terminate it. So if I've done everything correctly, then all we need to do is just connect the 3 power connections. So 3 IEC connections, 1 on each of these, 1 on the little power brick here. Connect the USB, get the software and everything installed. And yeah, we can get some testing underway. Ready for the moment of truth now. We're going to do a power on test. So I've got all the power connections set up here with the power board just running back to a power point near where Tom's got the camera. Only thing I haven't done is connect the USB connection just yet. That is running back to the PC, but what I want to do is just power it up, make sure that there's no craziness going on before we potentially send 240 volts back into the USB bus on my beautiful PC. So let's switch that on at the wall now. Tom's going to reach behind and you can hear some relays clicking away there. I see network communication. Yeah, so we got from, oh, there we go, look. Oh, well, that seemed to work, I think. So we'll get the PC booted up, get the drivers installed. Oh, if you reach down, can you feel vibration and stuff going on there? Can you feel?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
And they seem to be slightly different on each one as well.
Okay, cool. Right, I'll drive out then. I can see movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like they're all doing what they need to do. And do some skids.
Wow. Skids.
Crash. All right, well, yeah, it looks like it's working. So I guess the next step now is to pull the rig apart. Yay. And the point of no return now, once we commit to doing this, we're kind of, yeah, it's happening. All right, let's do it. So we've got the rig successfully detached from the Next Level Racing Traction Plus system, sitting on a couple of skateboards that we luckily had laying around, which have proven themselves to be very handy. So next step now is to kind of think about cable management and planning exactly where we're going to place the actuators on the rig as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But first of all, as you saw earlier, we've got this mounting plate, which came for the big control modules. As you can see here, that's one of them. Obviously there was a second one, the slave one as well. Now, normally it would make sense to kind of have this mounted underneath the seat. The seat's obviously going to sit on top, so the control modules would sit in this little void area here and not really need to be accessible. It's not something you need to touch once it's plugged in for the first time anyway. So that would be where most people would install it. Now, we may end up putting the seat mover back in on top of the D-box, just so we still have that dynamic movement for some of our first-person view videos. That's part of what kind of creates that dynamic look of the camera moving around a little bit. So yeah, we may end up wanting to do that. So we don't want to limit ourselves. Obviously, if we have those control modules sitting underneath, then we're not going to be able to drop the platform back in afterwards. So then we thought about doing it underneath the pedal plate instead, but I don't really want to have dust and bits and pieces from my feet falling in there, and I also don't want to potentially limit the ability to move the pedals around easily, because we are obviously changing out pedals quite frequently on this rig too. So what we've decided to do is mount the control modules up like so. So one's going to go on that side, the other one's going to go on that side, and then we're going to flip the entire thing over and just mount it in the middle like so. We'll just move that little cable out of the way so it's not getting pinched as well. We'll sort out all the cable management afterwards. So that gives us a nice clean panel across the front here. It's not going to interfere with anything else. It's going to stop us from potentially dropping things down underneath, or potentially having a leg or an arm caught underneath when the rig's moving as well, which is obviously always a safety consideration. So I think that's going to work quite well. I don't really see any reason why it shouldn't work. There's no reason why these modules need to be the right way up or upside down or whatever. I don't think it should make a difference. So yeah, we're going to get that done now. We obviously need to plan as well to make sure that our actuators are in the correct positions, not only spacing wise on the rig, but also in terms of orientation too. You can see on the master, we've got the front of the chair, which would be the front of the rig, left and right. So we're going to make sure that we orient these cables conducive to doing so. And then obviously the slave is going to be the rear too. And we need to make sure we get the sides right as well. So we're going to do all that stuff now, and we'll come in and give you a bit of a recap on exactly how we've done it all, any traps that we come across along the way once we're done. So we've removed the Next Level Racing Motion Platform V3 as well, which I'm a little bit sad about because I have really enjoyed using that, but it's going to be interesting to see what it's like braking with a fixed seat after being used to that for so long. One of the things that you guys would have noticed in a lot of our videos is there is that little bit of lash in the gears when you're just sort of sitting in the seat. It moves around a little bit. So having a really solid seat is going to be a different experience for me because I'm so used to that. Now the process of doing that has also dropped the seat quite a bit lower, probably about 3 or 4 inches lower than it was on the motion platform. So we are going to end up having to readjust everything else to compensate for the new seat position. So we'll have to drop the pedal deck down, we'll have to drop the wheel deck down. So you can see here now we have this little platform in here too, which is what our control modules for the D-Box are mounted underneath. And that seems to have worked quite well. It's nice and solid, sits on there very snugly. So I don't see any issues with sort of getting in and standing on that. So that's worked out really nicely. So the next thing to do now is get the actuators mounted to the rig. So there's a couple of things we need to consider here when it comes to placement. And I'm by no means an expert on this yet. It is going to be a little bit of trial and error for me. And obviously when we do our full review, I'll come back and I'll explain, you know, what we've discovered through trial and error and all those things. So this is just kind of me talking you through the process of learning it myself. So please don't take what I'm saying as absolute gospel. But from what I understand, and please do correct me if I'm wrong if you're experienced with this stuff, ideally you want to try and have the 4 actuators in a perfect square, because that means that the ratio of pitch and roll is going to be exactly the same. You can imagine if you have your front to rear spaced further away than your side to side, the amount of pitch that you're going to have is going to be less because it's spread over a wider distance than the amount of roll that you have. You can imagine if you look at my arm, if I go like that, it's rocking a lot for the same amount of movement. If I go like that, it's a lot less in terms of degrees of movement, if that makes sense. I think that makes sense. So yeah, we want to try and have it as square as we possibly can. We also want to have as even a weight distribution as we can. It's kind of like corner weighting on a race car, if you've ever done anything like that. We want to try and have an even amount of weight in each corner. Now, I don't have 4 sets of scales, unfortunately, so we're kind of just going to wing it here. But what we want to try and do is have the 2 rear actuators as far back as we possibly can here, because obviously the bulk of the weight is kind of in the rear where my bottom is, and then we're going to try and have the front ones as square as possible, but obviously not having too much weight hanging in front of them. So we're probably going to try and mount the front ones just in front of the wheel deck uprights, and then the rear ones at the back here. So we aren't going to have a perfect square. So what we're going to use is these little brackets, and these are just going to bolt on to the side of the actuator. Basically, which way is it? Like that. So one on either side, and then it literally just bolts on to the side with a couple of T-nuts in the side of the profile. So if all goes well, this is one of the last steps we need to do to get up and running. Then we just need to get the rig in position. Obviously make sure we've got the height adjustment right as well. One of the things we are going to try and do is drop the rig just a little bit lower in the in relation to the screens, and that's going to allow us to tilt the camera up a little bit more than what we've been able to do in the past. One of the things that a lot of people have commented on in our first person view videos is that they'd like to have the camera tilted up a little bit more. You can imagine if you're sitting here and you tilt the camera up more, if that's your threshold of sky in the game, then anything above that, you're going to be looking at the black curtain behind and the 4th monitor. So having the platform a little lower is going to mean we have a little bit more screen above. We'll lose a little bit at the bottom, but that's a little bit less important than at the top. So we'll try and sort out that positioning at the same time too. And we'll spend a little bit of time tidying up all of our cable management in the same process as well. So let's get going. Actuators are on now, so basically what we did was just measure, again using our little set square tool, the exact right gap, top and bottom, to make sure they're not twisted, so they're nice and square. The brackets have a decent face here, so you can kind of measure between the top and the bottom just to make sure you've got everything completely flush. And then again on this side, same measurement, just to make absolutely sure. On the front, what we did was just butt the bracket right up against the edge here, because we know that our uprights are in exactly the right spot. So if we measure the distance between here and here as a reference point, it's exactly the same on both sides. Now, just while we're down here, we'll talk about cable management quickly too. Obviously, we've still got to sort out all this mess, which is the next step. And you can see there's a few cable ties hanging around which we've already started to work on. Let me just put this down again. But for cable management for the actuators, we've been very careful not to exceed bend radius anywhere. Now, I didn't see quoted anywhere what the exact bend radius was, but you can kind of just tell if you start to kink the cable, it gets quite difficult to bend. So we've kind of tried to tuck everything around make sure that nothing's dragging on the ground. And if you come around the front a little bit more as well, you can see down in here, all the cabling's kind of tucked away. We haven't pinched anything with cable ties, we just kind of secured it in place. And we just kind of worked our way through, made sure that everything's run nicely around here as well. You can see running down, and again, a nice kink that goes around without pinching the cable. And we also wanted to make sure we had a bit of clearance here. We put some end caps on the bottoms of these two, just to make sure we're not running up against any sharp edges, particularly on the other side. If we come around on this side, we had to kind of bend it around the upright here, so it's coming around and down. So again, we put a nice twist in it, so we're not getting any kinks, and none of this cabling will ever move. So we've really put a lot of time into, you know, just making sure that everything is nice and secure so things won't move around. So happy with how everything's going so far. One other thing we just changed a moment ago too, if we come back over to the seat. So we've added these little levers as well, front and back, so 4 of them, and that allows us to just loosen off the seat and slide it forward and back very easily. We've put some little felt pads underneath. Basically, we've taken inspiration from the Next Level Racing FGT Elite cockpit that we reviewed the other day. That didn't utilize a standard seat slider, and we actually quite like that design. Although it's a little bit more difficult to move the seat, you don't get that little tiny bit of flex that is sometimes present in these kind of seat sliders like what we have here, which is just a Sparco style. In fact, I think it actually is a Sparco seat rail. There can be a little tiny bit of flex in these sometimes when you've got your weight in the seat. So yeah, we're just trying to make everything as solid as we possibly can. So next step is to sort out all the cable management down there. Once we've done that, I'm also going to shoot a second video, just basically giving you a tour around the entire cockpit and all the little bits and pieces that we have while everything's pulled away from the screens. But yeah, cable management to do, and then we'll be ready to drop it down onto the ground and do some driving. So I think we're just about ready to get this thing off the trolleys and into position now. Let's just quickly run through what we've done in terms of cable management. So look, I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. We just mounted the USB hub on its side down here. We've got the ports on the side. That's one little tip that I would give you guys. Always make sure you don't have your USB hubs facing upwards, because crap will get inside the ports and damage them over time. So on the side is good, or pointing downwards if you can. So I tied it all up, just kind of wound everything up into a bundle here. Hopefully we don't get any crosstalk or interference. I don't think we will, because that's how I've run it in the past and it hasn't been a problem. Now what we've done here in terms of cable management is just use these little clips that came with our SimLabs P1X, and what it is basically just inserts into our channel like so. So it just drops in and twists, and then that's in position nice and solid. And you can run a cable tie through in that direction, or a cable band if you want as well, like a Velcro strap, or through in that direction as well. So lots of versatility there. And we've run those basically anywhere where we have cabling which we know isn't going to change, or at least, you know, we don't anticipate will change, we've used those. So for all of our looms for the actuators, and then up here as well for the wheelbase. If you have a look here, I've kept these ones a little bit loose so we can bring the cables through, and it just kind of keeps them held in position. And then this guy here is just our connection for our two, we've got Cube Controls wheels that are wired, as well as our Asher Racing wheel, which is on the rig at the moment. Yeah, I think everything else is good to go now. We've got our cables running out here. This is our power. This little box is the power to our WinSim, power to our 2 control modules, master and slave there, those 2. And then this is the power that connects to the power transformer for the SimuCube 2 Ultimate. And this is the connection for the USB hub, so that's going to run around to the other side. There's a USB connection running under the curtain there. And then we've just got our connectors to run back to our streaming PC, which are on this side. And yeah, we should be sweet. So we'll get the trolley in position. And yeah, I think probably the best way to do this is going to be to pull the trolleys out and then kind of lift the rig and shuffle it into position. We've still got these little cups to deal with on the bottom of the actuators too. We've got those captive Delrin pads, and yeah, we'll be good to go. So we're very close to being up and running now. We managed to get the rig off the dollies, and we actually guessed it to within 5 millimeters, which was pretty cool. So all we need to do now before we can fire up is just put our little non-captive feet underneath the bases of our actuators. So just to explain this in a little bit more detail, let me crowd down here or crouch down. So the way these sit at the moment, they've got a rounded bottom. So you can imagine as the cockpit pitches and rolls, it's going to be rolling around effectively on these feet. Now, what will happen is if the carpet underneath it or the whatever surface you got underneath it kind of binds a little bit, then that's going to add additional stress to our actuators, which obviously we don't want. So we put these little non-captive feet underneath it. What that allows is for the convex surface here to interface with the surface that we have in our little nylon or Delrin or Teflon or whatever it is insert, and then that can move around, it can tilt, as well as slide if it needs to, with minimal amount of restrictions. So we're going to slide one of those underneath each one of the feet, and then we'll be good to power up. So it's the moment of truth now. I've genuinely never experienced a full motion platform before. So I'm going to switch it on. I think what's going to happen if what we saw on the test bed before or on the ground is the whole platform is going to raise up. I'm going to have to keep an eye on my feet because they are directly underneath the monitor, but I've done that deliberately because that's the best ratio for 1-to-1 on the screens. So yeah, just going to keep an eye on that. It looks like it's about 4 inches though, and the platform only raises up maximum of 1.5 inch. So should be absolutely fine. We just have to account obviously for the tilt in the platform too, because the pedals are further forward than the actuators are. So I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm kind of anxious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch all the power on to everything. So Sim PC, Sim hardware. We're watching the little D-Box motion controller down there. I've got a red light at the moment because we don't have any USB connection. Screens are up. Can touch metal without being zapped, so that's good. Nothing happening here yet. Let's power on the PC. Okay, that's going to cycle itself. Oh, we're moving. Whoa. Up and down. There we go. Okay, so we went all the way up. We went all the way down, and then it's centered. So that's like a calibration process, I assume, like a self-calibration thing. It felt very precise. Like I could feel, you know, the slight notching as it went up, but I'm assuming once it's all running, it'll be smoothed out and everything. But yeah, that was weird. All right, we'll get up and running here. And I think we'll load up the motion control software and actually run through the calibration self-test thing. I think that'll make sure that we've got logic, we've got a logical sound with front and rear and left and right and everything as well, because there is a chance that we messed that up, but I don't think we did. Really hope we didn't. Get my mouse and everything. Okay, there we go. Oh, we've just gone back down to the floor again. So obviously it's gone into like a sleep mode or something. The height felt pretty good though when it was at that midpoint compared to the screens. It felt about where I'm used to, so that's good. Let's close off all these other little apps that we don't really need to run for now. Discord go, RaceLab can close, Go XLR can close. Okay, let's open up the D-Box Game Center software. It looks like we've got good communications. It's showing as connected. Let's go test. Now, should it be doing something? Yep, there we go. All right, so we go all the way up, all the way down, all the way up. It's going through a frequency sweep. Whoa. Jeez. It's going all the way down to like 1 hertz. That's crazy. Whoa. I probably should be wearing the seatbelt. Frequency sweep again. That's amazing how much vibration that sends through the rig. That's like having it's like having butt kickers everywhere. That's amazing. I really wasn't expecting it to. Just worried my phone's going to fall off the platform. Okay, now we're. Oh, it feels weird in your butt. That's crazy. Wow. Okay, so it's obviously working. That's front to right, front to back, left to right. All right, I'm going to stop the test there because. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run through the identify actuators routine. So we're going to click on start actuator identification test next. Okay, so front right should start to do things. So it's going to calibrate. Okay. Yeah, centered. All right, so the front right is now notching up and down just slightly. So you can actually see it on the screen there as well. And that's definitely in the right spot. That's good. Yeah, that can't be wrong if that one's right because it's on the same module. So, right rear. Yep. It's good. And left rear. There we go. It's actually quite surprising how much sensation you actually get in each corner of your body just sitting here. Like I can very clearly, even without looking at that, like I could tell that it's that one that's going, even though it's not moving very much. So that kind of makes me think this is actually going to work really well as like a butt kicker system for vibration in each corner of the car, assuming that the telemetry actually allows us to do that. And these are all the things that we'll explore when we go through and do our proper review. But I think now it's time to go for a drive. What do you think? Yeah? Yeah? All good? Okay, so moment of truth. Now we're running completely default settings here. I'm not going to get into adjustment or anything like that in today's video. I want to really spend the time to understand everything properly before I even talk about something like that. But this is just going to be a first drive, first experience as the D-Box V3 comes out of the box. So let's hit test. And I've deliberately not watched much about this just so I've got a completely blank slate. I'm a complete virgin when it comes to this. So let's hit test now. All right. Oh, engine vibration. Whoa. That's crazy. Okay, so the entire platform is shaking with the engine RPM. Like it's quite loud in my ears, like it's echoing through my head quite a bit. So I probably would actually turn that down a bit if anything. But anyway, let's head out here. Whoa. That is insane. So you don't... Yeah, that's... The way you feel the car dip is so different to the seat mover. I can catch the slides. I'm catching the slides. In a GT3 car, that's something I don't normally do. All the little bumps in the road as well. Now, I'm told that the road texture, and this is a motion platform generically speaking, not pertaining to the D-Box directly, but road textures can be a bit funny. Let's see how it feels through the dipper here. Whoa, uh-oh, I'm gonna crash now. How's that gonna feel? That's crazy. It's so, like, it completely transforms the driving experience, and there's so much going on that like it's hard to sort of know where to start with it. And obviously my seating position is quite a bit different to what I'm used to as well. So there's a lot of things going on all at once, but I guess the thing that's really got me is just the amount of texture. Because like I envisaged a full motion platform being, primarily about just the movement of the car, the suspension, and communicating, G-forces and things like that. But really where this is, I feel like it's offering the most value to me just out of the box is just in the texture that I'm feeling, those subtle little things. And you'll notice, I mean, at least for me sitting in the driver's seat, I don't know what it looks like on camera, but it doesn't feel like it's moving that much in terms of, deflection. But it just feels so... The movement feels so genuine. And even just little details like when you change gears, it kind of just clunks you. It's really like having a butt kicker, but a butt kicker that actually moves the whole rig. But I mean, I feel like my driving's all over the place because it's such a new experience to me, but I feel like I'm catching slides that I perhaps wouldn't have before. I don't know. It's too early to say on that regard. All right, so I'm gonna try and put in a quick lap now. My best lap around here is a 122.7 in this car, so I'm gonna see what I can do. compared to that. Obviously, remembering again that my muscle memory from my braking is shot because I don't have the seat mover. Steering is in a slightly different position. Seating is lower, so there's a lot of new things to learn here, so it's certainly not going to be conclusive. But I just want to see whether I can get anywhere near it, essentially. Oh, a little wide there. Trying to use all the track. Late on the power. Still within half a second, which is better than I was expecting. Through the corkscrew. Actually, not too bad. We'll do one more. So 0.5 of a second up. That was a... I must have had it off track because it didn't record it, but... Oops, spun it out. I'll leave it there, but yeah, I mean, it's too early to say whether it's going to make me a faster driver or not, but I think the things that I'm noticing immediately is, like, obviously the engine vibration at the moment is probably a little bit over the top. I'm definitely going to turn that down and experiment with that, but just the sensation that you get of what the car's doing underneath you, the feeling of tire slip, and particularly the ripple strips and bumping over them, having that heave effect and having the ability for the car to sort of just move around underneath you and dance underneath you is definitely something that's brand new to me, something that I kind of, in my head, I've had an idea of what a full motion cockpit would feel like for a very long time now. And there are some elements that I think are very accurate to what I was expecting, but there's some things that this does that I just sort of didn't really even anticipate. Like that, just the subtle vibrations and things like that. I kind of expected it to be more of a sort of movement and moving around kind of experience than I guess a more tactile experience, like feeling what the car's doing rather than, feeling the sensation of the G-force, so to speak. So as a first impression, yeah, absolutely blown away by it. It's just, yeah, I mean, you can tell by the excitement. This is probably the most excited I've been in a sim rig since the butt kicker and since we first fired up the triple screens. So yeah, it's absolutely awesome, but I'm definitely going to spend a whole bunch of time here getting more used to it, understanding how everything works, and we'll come back before too long and do a full review. We'll pull one of the actuators off as well, give you a close-up look at all those details and bits and pieces that we've kind of skimmed over in today's video. But I hope you guys have found this one interesting. If you do have any questions or anything that you think I should be doing, anybody that has one of these, that has any suggestions for setups, please do let me know in the comments, because I'm very much still learning about all this. But guys, thank you very much for watching. Leave a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. And a big thank you once again to SimLabs and D-Box for making this possible. Really do appreciate them sending this over to us to check out. And yeah, we'll put some links down in the description below for you guys as well to check out both of their websites. So thanks very much to them. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye.